So the New York Times recently ran an opinion piece that was rather pro-ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods we often think of as junk foods. So this was a kind of surprising piece, but the authors made some great points. But of course, this led to all sorts of drama with plenty of readers writing in, and the New York Times ran their rebuttals. Big old drama over ultra-processed foods. Now, ultra-processed foods are obviously a very hot topic in the health world. I'm sure you've seen the word pop up on all sorts of stories and places telling you to never, under any circumstances, eat those foods. But it turns out it's actually a lot more complicated, and ultra-processed foods can actually be useful if you think about them in the right way. So in order to help us think about them in a more productive way, I'm bringing on an old friend. His name is Dr. Mike Roussel. He got his PhD in nutrition from Penn State. He has gone on to work with NBA players, with really busy tech executives, and with everyday people. And he is really great at helping people dial in what they eat in a way that helps them reach their goals. And Dr. Mike, by the way, also has a really fantastic Substack with an even better name. It is called Dad Bod Rebuilt. And this guy would know because he is a father of 4 teenagers. They are great kids, but they are a lot of work. Yet he has managed to stay extremely fit and eat very well. So he's going to give us some lessons now. Dr. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me. This is awesome.
So we're going to talk about ultra-processed foods, which is a hot topic, became somewhat hotter because the New York Times, these 2 scientists run this piece called "We Shouldn't Want to Eat Like Our Grandparents." And they basically point out there's this push towards eat real food, which is what our grandparents and great-grandparents ate, but malnutrition was rampant in the past. So they're pointing out how basically this modern food system takes a ton of crap. At the same time, it's really been sort of a miracle overall for human health in terms of getting people fed, avoiding malnutrition. Now, of course, when you publish a piece like this, there's going to be people who clap back and people are like, yeah, but why is everyone obese? Why is diabetes rampant? Why is XYZ? So what was your take when you looked at those pieces?
I sort of feel similar to the authors in that I think what we've done with food is amazing. You know, when you look at the landscape of food and nutrition and malnutrition, and we were talking in the US specifically, it's so much less than it ever was. Like, it's not eradicated because there's still, people dealing with this, but compared to what it used to be, and if you look at even just the tenor of nutrition research, it's so much fewer research is about preventing malnutrition. Right. And it's all about actually dealing with diseases of overnutrition.
Right. So, we've had to shift. Had to shift. Yeah. In the past, it was like people were dying because they weren't getting enough of nutrient X, Y, Z. And so we start to realize this, and the government comes in and goes, okay, well, maybe we should add nutrition X, Y, Z to wheat or whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden you start to see all these people surviving because we've solved that problem with sciencing our food effectively.
Right. Yeah, 100%. If you look at even just how the RDAs are determined from a micronutrient perspective, it's what's the level that we need to make sure that, 2 standard deviations above the mean gets enough of this nutrient.
Yeah,
right?
so RDA is basically the recommended daily allowance of vitamins, minerals, protein, those sorts of things.
Yeah,
right?
and it's all in I think the telling piece about it is the definition is purely around preventing disease of malnutrition.
Yeah.
So when those were created, that is what everyone was focused on. And I don't think oftentimes ultra-processed foods and food manufacturing and food science all kind of get lumped in together as one thing, and then it becomes negative, right? But I think what we've done from a nutritional perspective to eradicate, the easy pickings of malnutrition is incredible. The Steve Jobs unintended consequence of that is companies got really good at doing different things with food. And then these companies, their jobs are to make money. You make money by selling food. How do you sell more food, right? You make it less expensive, you make it last longer on the shelf, you make it taste better, and all of those things. And that's what brings you into ultra processed food. And I think it was funny because we were going to, sit and talk about this. And I have my youngest is 11. And he gets on the bus right now later than everybody else. So in the morning, we just kind of can chop it up while he's getting ready for school. And he said to me, he's like, Dad, he's like, because what did I do? There's like a chicken finger chain called Raising Cane's.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
I'm familiar.
I made for the kids like this knockoff high protein, low fat Raising Cane sauce with Greek yogurt and like low fat sour cream instead of mayonnaise. And they thought it was amazing. My son was like, wait. High protein Raising Cane sauce? How did I not know this existed?
You got a business idea, man.
So Joseph, my youngest, he had this in his mind. He's like, Dad, what if we go to the store and get all of the ingredients to make Cool Ranch Doritos, and then we make them tonight after school? And I was like, Joseph, it's like, that is a great thing to do. However, Cool Ranch Doritos are ultra processed foods. And by definition, we cannot make them in our kitchen. Like, we don't have the tools, the machinery to actually make that. I was like, because I'm sure you've had a tortilla chip, right? And a tortilla chip and a Cool Ranch Dorito, they do not taste the same at all. And, for me, like, that's the crux. And I do a lot of work with student athletes, high school student athletes, collegiate student athletes. And then also, with my own kids. And that's one of the things, like with ultra processed foods, really talk about like the word ultra processed food with them as much. But these are things that we can't make in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And we have to be aware that these things are also really easy to consume.
Yeah.
Like you could take a Pizza Hut pizza, which is not the same one that they had when we were kids, right? And you could, if you had no teeth, you could still eat it.
Right. You can gum that. Just gum it right down.
Right, which is one of the things, like one of the characteristics with ultra processed foods, there's a research study showed that you can eat more calories per bite, like faster.
Yeah, so let's actually talk about this. Are you talking about the Kevin Hall study?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll quickly walk through that. This guy, and I'm probably going to get the specifics wrong, but basically what this guy did is he took a group of people, put them in like a metabolic ward, right? And which is where you're counting. Actually, you walk us through it. You have the PhD. What am I doing here?
It was good. No, I was drinking my tea and getting ready to hear it. So basically, these metabolic wards, there aren't a lot of them because they're pretty extensive, but it's an extreme controlled environment where they're measuring gas exchange from the people that are there. They're weighing and measuring all the food that's going in. So they truly know what has entered the human and what has exited the human from down to the periodic table of elements. Yeah. And you could do some really cool research, but there aren't a lot of places that have these facilities, as you can imagine.
Not cheap.
Yeah. And so what they started, one of the things they did was they were looking at ultra processed foods versus non-processed foods and consumption patterns, and when they provide people with food, what happens. And one of the most interesting findings is that with ultra processed foods, you can just eat more calories per bite and more calories per time than non-processed foods.
Yeah.
And that is something that people don't consider.
So, and in the study, they fed them meals that were matched, very similar meals. They're matched for like protein, and they basically shove the food into the ward, and they say, okay, eat until you're full. And so for whatever it was, a week, they're eating these non-processed versions of the food. The other week, they're eating the ultra-processed versions of the food. And then they're saying, okay, well, how much did people actually eat? And we told them, just eat until you're full. When they eat the ultra-processed version, they eat it's like 500 extra calories a day. And it goes back to the fact, to your point about you can just gum this stuff down and it's not as filling. People just eat the food faster and there's more calories per bite in general. So if you're eating faster and the food has more calories, all of a sudden you've eaten a lot more food without necessarily meaning to or realizing. And then that in turn, where the whole health argument comes in, is that you get people who end up eating more than they're burning food-wise. So people gain weight, and then health problems come in when people tip into obesity, more or less. So it's not like the ultra-processed food, I mean, maybe you could argue it is. It's not like it's inherently evil. It's more just people tend to eat more of it. And when you eat more of something, you might tip into obesity, and then there's health implications with that.
Yeah, I think your verbiage of inherently evil is a good one, because I think when we start putting this like evil versus good veil over foods that we eat, companies that make the food, etc., it's not very useful, because I actually think these different kinds of foods have utility in different places. And with young athletes, it's a wonderful dichotomy, because for a young athlete who's burning a lot of calories, to meet their calorie needs, to do it with what I would consider minimally processed foods. So these are foods essentially in their natural is such a loaded term, and so I apologize for using it. Like natural state, like imagine a carrot, right? Or something that's been manually processed to extract a nutrient, like olive oil, right? Mm-hmm. So the olive has been squeezed, the oil is extracted, and so you have olive oil. So those two, there's like this 4-tier system for food processing. Those are the first 2 tiers, and I group those together and just call them minimally processed foods. Yeah. So another example, like oats, for example, would be a minimally processed food. Like it's been manually mashed, so you can actually consume it.
Yeah, and then just so people kind of understand, the ultra processed version of like let's take oats for an example. If you just have the oats that have been rolled over, so you can have them in your oatmeal, that's minimally processed. But when you take the oats and you bind them in sugar and you throw in chocolate chips and raisins and like sugar dusting and frosting on the top, and now you have the sort of like oatmeal bar, now we're getting into ultra processed territory. And you're wrapping it, you're throwing in all these preservatives, you're doing all these things so it'll sit on the shelf for a long time. 1, 2, it will taste so much damn better than your plain oatmeal. Like it's just like this explosion of flavor in your mouth.
So the next one would be there's unprocessed, and then it's depending on how you look at it, like culinary or manually processed, which is like the oat, and then there's processed foods. Processed foods you could still make in your own kitchen, and they usually have salt, sugar, fat added to them, or some preservatives, right? So salt is often a very common preservative. So processed foods that generally people love, like a nice salami, like that sort of thing, sausage, like that food is also delicious, but it's a processed food because they've added the salt and some of the maybe nitrates for the preservative. So in your example of oatmeal, something I grew up on as a kid just because we didn't know any better, like the apple cinnamon instant oatmeal packets, right? Yeah. So they take that, they've added sugar to oatmeal, that becomes processed. Ultra processed would be one step further, which you further elaborated. They've added other things. It's now a bar. It's coated in this delicious coating. You could not make this because you don't have an extrusion machine in your kitchen, right? So you couldn't make it, and it'll last on the shelf for 2.5 years. So that would be ultra processed. And that's like the evolution of these things.
Yeah.
And just because it could last for 2 years and is coated in sugar, and you could probably eat it without teeth, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Because if I'm looking at an athlete who is playing 2 games in 90-degree weather with a 50-minute break in between, what I need that athlete to eat in between is something that they're going to be able to consume very quickly, taste good because they're going to want to eat it because they're too hot to really want to consume, but we need to get them the calories, something that's going to be digested quickly. Like basically most of what would check the box for an ultra-processed food. And so it really becomes down to where are you going to use this food in your life? That's where ultra-processed foods can be really good. Protein powder is a great example. Protein powders, definitely. Like try making whey protein isolate in your kitchen. Like good luck, right? Like you can't get an ion exchange whey extractor off of Facebook Marketplace. But
I don't know. You ever been to Vegas? I think I could probably get you one in about 20 minutes.
But that is a great food. That's a great nutritional tool to have, and it helps all kinds of people. meet their protein needs on a consistent basis. So, where we started talking about the Kevin Hall study and ultra processed foods that you can eat them faster and they taste better, that's really where the problem comes in, because you would look at something and say, I'm going to eat this because it's less expensive, more convenient. Oh, by the way, it also has 500 calories and you can eat it in 6.5 seconds.
Yeah. I think
that's the problem.
An extreme example would be, let's say you had 2 slices of Domino's pizza. Anyone could eat that in 2 minutes, and you would go, you know what sounds great right now? A 3rd slice of Domino's pizza. If you had 500 calories in apples, oh my God, you could probably only eat 3 of them, which would be 300 calories. And they'd be like, oh my God, I'm so full off of these apples. I do not want to eat another apple for at least 24 hours. And so then you do the math and you're like, oh, I could see how if you were eating mostly less processed food, you're just going to end up eating less over the course of a day compared to if you're getting your food mainly from ultra processed stuff. And so it just pushes people into too much effectively.
Exactly. And I think one of the other interesting pieces about that too, and it's on the food business side, is one of the things that gets stripped out of food is, as it moves down the processing chain, are vitamins and fiber, right? Because in order to consume it faster and easier, you need to remove the roughage. And oftentimes the roughage, especially like in grains, is where these nutrients are housed. And so right now, like I was just talking to someone who was at Expo West, and he was saying he expected it to be all about creatine, right? Because creatine is like really hot right now again. But it was all about fiber. And I think that to me is really interesting, because I have long felt fiber is like one of the most underrated nutrients. Like if you were to look at what should you focus on to improve your overall nutrition, you focus on your protein intake and you focus on your fiber intake.
Why is that with fiber?
Well, because fiber tracks with other food properties that's really helpful.
Okay.
So if you are choosing higher fiber foods, so you're eating broccoli, you're eating spinach, you're eating beans, you're eating lentils, you're eating brown rice, you're eating whole grain bread. So you're eating all these foods that are going to require a lot more chewing, and they're going to require a lot more time to eat. It's like kind of basically the opposite of the ultra processed foods. But what's happening now is that fiber is becoming an additive.
Right.
And this was years ago, 10 years ago. I was giving a talk at the Peak Performance, this gym in Manhattan that was run by, one of my mentors, Joe Dowdell, and was talking about, and that was right when Quest bars came out. And they were like really popular, like when they first hit. And they were one of the first brands to really make it with these functional fibers to make up a lot of the bar. So if you looked at the bar, it had 20 grams of fiber. And so one of the trainers raised their hand because we were talking about fiber, and he's like, yeah, but is this all the same? Because if I eat a Quest bar and get 15 grams of fiber, or I eat a cup and a half of beans and get 10 to 15 grams of fiber, I feel a lot different.
Yeah.
And so how science will then talk about this differently is they call it intact fiber, right, versus functional fiber. And so you really want to focus on intact fiber, because just like protein was such a buzzword, it started getting added to everything. And it was like, if it had protein, it had to be good. That's where it's going with fiber now. But it's all of these ultra processed foods that are having prebiotic fibers or other types of fibers added to them that aren't what I really think what we're going to find. They're not going to have the same effects. Yeah. They're not going to have the same satiety effects. They're not going to have the same effects on your GI tract. And so there is such a value in these minimally processed foods because of the nutrient package that they all bring. But ultra processed and processed foods definitely have a place because they have really good functionality in our lives.
Meaning they're convenient. It's like, let's give protein as an example. If I was to try and carry around the least processed type of protein I could, I might fill a Ziploc bag full of grilled chicken and carry it around in my backpack as I fly around, which is weird. And also, like, is it going to spoil? Is it going to smell weird? Whereas if I go, all right, I got a 15-hour flight. I want to eat something that's not terrible. I want to get some protein. Here's your protein bar. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. It's in a package. I can eat it. You know what? Would the grilled chicken be better? Yeah, but I'm on a 15-hour flight. Like, that's not going to work. So a lot of these foods that are kind of like I guess I would call them fitnessy foods, just sort of give you an option that's more practical. Is it optimal? Probably not. Is it more practical? And is it better than going, well, I'm just going to sit on this flight and eat Doritos and Chex Mix and a Coca-Cola? Yes, probably. So it just sort of comes down to like, don't let perfect be the enemy of good in a way.
Yeah. Well, I think what it also does is it doesn't give you the form in which you consume nutrients changes the experience. And so we've known, we talked about the Kevin Hall study, but this really goes back to Barbara Rolls, who was a professor when I was at Penn State with her energy density work, which was that basically if, the volume of food that you eat, it drives, which is the weight of the food that you're consuming is the main factor, not the calories.
Yeah.
And
how much room it takes up in your stomach per calorie effectively.
Yes. Yes. And so like if you ate a pound, like they would do this with kids. So they would give them macaroni and cheese. And then they would give them macaroni and cheese, but they would blend in like zucchini and squash. And they would give them the same amount of weight, but the calories were different because there was, zucchini and squash has like no calories. And the kids would be just as full, but they would eat significantly less calories when there was the vegetables blended into it. So it just goes to show infants have it because they can actually regulate calorie intake if they manipulate calorie content of formula. Like infants will stop based on the calories consumed, but they're very quickly in life, that goes out the window and it's all weight and volume. And so when we think, hey, I'm going to have this protein bar, 25 grams of protein, and then in your mind, you're thinking, I'm eating protein, it's satiating, and all these other things. You lose that when you eat it in the bar form or you drink it in the shake form. Like research from Heather Leidy, who's just a prolific protein researcher, she showed years ago that the satiety or the fullness that you feel after drinking a protein shake versus after eating whole protein is significantly different. One of the reasons like people tout protein is because it's satiety, but when you drink a protein shake, it's like nothing. It's like it's like eating rice. Like the satiety value is extremely small.